Greetings, mere mortals. If you don't recall, in my previous video, I did specify that I wouldn't really be doing all of my explaining the murder drones lore videos in order, and not in order per se. What I meant to say is I won't be doing them all in a row. I'm not just going to hold off every other video for the sake of completing that one series first. I'll make the rest of the videos later, and I frankly need a break from that because it'll be a nightmare to edit. I spent like 3 weeks trying to get the last one edited. Not 3 weeks for that, but that and trying to get it to actually upload properly. Also, after this video, since I saw that Yagster made a new video about why episode 5 was a failure, which I've been arguing against for a long time, I'm definitely going to make a rebuttal video about that whole thing, because I could not disagree more. But, being accurate to the topic of this video, I'm here to discuss the depth, intrigue, and kind of nuanced, interesting story of Uzi Doorman's character. I've done the same thing with V. Hopefully this time I can actually get a video to 2K, because the V one is perpetually stuck at 1.9K. But really, it's fun to do. And Uzi is one of the most underrated characters. It's honestly crazy how many people call Uzi overrated when she gets almost no love from the community, and is one of the most complex characters. Just N and V really overshadow her in popularity, which I hate. Even though V is definitely the most complex character in the entire show so far. Started off a brief summary and reminder of what Uzi is. Uzi Doorman is a zombie drone born on Copper 9. She's the daughter of Nori Doorman, another zombie drone who was part of a Cabin Fever Labs and their organization that researched the Absolute Solver in order to try to understand it. Eventually, this research backfired. Eva seems to have gotten hurt by it somehow, and Nori fully got possessed by the Absolute Solver a good bit after getting the hang of it and becoming an admin. In the process, Nori eventually almost destroys the planet and still wipes out all human life, and then escapes right before she ends up actually destroying the planet. In the present day, Nori was killed by the disassembly drones. We don't know which one yet, despite the very popular theory being that it's N. And Uzi has inherited the Absolute Solver, as well as now Nori's admin status. Uzi has had the Absolute Solver and its power since a very young age. We don't exactly know when it started manifesting for the first time, but in episode 2 we see in a flashback that Uzi had possessed Brayden even before episode 1, which, upon pondering further, I've come up with the conclusion that that is solid evidence that she's had it way farther back than episode 1, and that we really just she didn't really know, so we haven't really seen her speak about it till now, until after episode 2, where she first learned of it. Uzi never understood it, but hacking is very blatantly an absolute solver ability, as we see in both episodes 3 and episode 5. Therefore, that one feels very set in stone to me. The thing about Uzi, personality-wise, which I should actually get to now that I've explained the basics of what she is. The thing is, Uzi's character is built in a way that it seems generic on the surface and archetypal, but not only does it do that generic archetypal style in a charming and interesting way that really draws you into the series, but they actually go beyond that. The archetypes are what they start off with because they're imitating humans. But as you go on, you could really see the character growth and development as their personalities slowly become more dynamic and both amplify the whole archetype thing tenfold, but also delve into other parts of their personality. They play the archetypes with a straight face in a satire way, which is definitely good. And then they throw on actual interesting dynamic personality on top of that and kind of build around. It's a very unique writing style, which I'd say is honestly pretty inspiring. One of the most, I don't even know the words for it, one of the most intricate styles I've seen. And Uzi's character development is definitely very easy to see. As early as episode 1, we see that she was very much a standard edgy teen character. She had father issues, obviously. There was her mother dying, which we can very blatantly see throughout multiple scenes, is influencing her personality and how she acts. There was also a one tsundere scene. We know for a fact that Uzi is canonically a goth as well, which is yet again edgy, and etc. But even in episode 1, we see Uzi's character gradually change. At the start, she is really cocky. She thinks that she can destroy all the disassembly drones with her railgun. She thinks that she can actually win that. But, of course, she barely manages to survive and doesn't even manage to fully kill N. She only manages to erase his memory by blowing his head off, which after that he's pretty much become immune to, as the same thing has now happened repeatedly. Furthermore, after that, she's slowly taught N to question his situation, because whether he liked it or not, he was just a puppet. He liked doing his job, but he had to eventually realize that the company, or as he thought was a company, when it was actually the absolute solver controlling their actions and putting them on this path. He thought that they were on his side at the time, but they just weren't. The absolute solver was really screwing up their entire lives. It was just sending them to wipe out all the worker drones, supposedly to make it so that more zombie drones activate from improper disposal, but that's just a theory. And they would just leave them there to overheat while the entire planet gets destroyed. Uzi was the first one to question that. She asked, what would the company, as of course the first episode was still following that lie, that it was the company doing all of this, that it was J.C. Jensen responsible. Uzi questioned why the company wouldn't just dispose of him after the workers are dead. She questioned why it actually kills, and etc. That episode, she planted the seeds in N's mind that led to him rebelling against J and V. She was the one who taught N that sometimes you need to actually, not be a doormat, which was definitely a very big part of N's character development already, which is another thing. Just like N does, Uzi also helps everyone around her develop. Uzi and N are both major parts of V's character development, as I mentioned in my previous video. They all cause each other to change in crazy ways, but Uzi and N really carry that. When Uzi grows more trusting towards N throughout the series, and throughout episode 1, her goal heavily changes, where at first she just wanted to take the fight to the murder drones. At the end of episode 1, she decided to shift her focus, since she still believed that J.C. Jensen sent the disassembly drones. She decided to fully change direction and murder all humans. Counter-genocide was really shocking that was her first decision, but I actually really wanted to see that happen. It's sad that it probably won't happen now, because J.C. Jensen has been confirmed to not be responsible for this, but whatever. The main force that's really been pushing Uzi to grow as a character is the Absolute Sulfur. She used to just seem like a normal worker drone, but because of the Absolute Sulfur, now she knows that she's a zombie drone. She's not normal. She's already been heavily ostracized and hated her entire life. And now she has this weird Robo-Satan Eldritch AI magic program in her coding that she needs to deal with regularly. And she has to worry about her doing things like breaking things whenever she looks at them, causing her to overheat and etc., which slowly gets worse as time goes by. She's realized that she can't deal with everything alone and tried to team up with Doll because of that reason, but Doll refused, which was another thing that helped. Uzi learned that you can't just trust everyone. Doll, despite being in just as bad of a situation, did not care one bit. She immediately tried to eliminate V and Uzi. And I do get that Doll had her reason that she wanted revenge on V. But, of course, that doesn't really justify it at all. Doll is, while she, just like Uzi and V, J, etc., while she is on the broken scale, she's still evil, as far as we see. A factual sense, she is. And episode 4 is where a major turning point happens in Uzi's character. her overuse of the absolute solver after acquiring it matches heavily Doll's overuse. Overuse on the thing that causes her to overheat was an incredibly stupid idea, and we see throughout the episode that it's really affecting her. I'm gonna check the camera real quick because, that's kind of a thing I do at this point because the camera's inconsistent. So just wait a bit. Anyway, as I was saying, the camera wasn't quite turned off, but it was getting close, so I made the right decision there. Uzi's over-reliance was really starting to become a problem in episode 4. She was relying for even the most basic things on the very source of all of her problems, which we can see as the time goes by escalates horribly when she starts overheating. But of course, that is the surface level view of everything, because underneath it all, there's so much more to her character in that episode than anyone ever bothers paying attention to or appreciating. As you see, throughout the episode, it wasn't fully the result of her overuse that everything happened. There was more to it as well. Of course, I already mentioned that Uzi's classmates ostracized and hated her, but it gets deeper in that episode because even though the murder drones are just factually genocidal, even though they've committed genocide before and killed a very large scale of worker drones, the workers still actually like the disassembly drones more than Uzi. They and V actually fit in more with the class than Uzi does. And we can blatantly see that everyone, it's a hilarious but also really dark scene because of really what it means for Uzi, but the entire class started running to Anne whenever Uzi mentioned that she was his friend, which is hilarious because they basically offered to be his friend because they thought if he's befriended Uzi, then he must be lonely. That was hilarious. There was also Rebecca and Darren, even Emily, I believe, being absolute simps for Anne, which definitely frustrated Uzi a lot. I always make jokes about how that's why Uzi ripped Rebecca's legs off, but, at the very least you could tell that it frustrated her back with the whole boat thing. Throughout episode 4, which the name is symbolic, as I've also mentioned in a previous video. It's called Cabin Fever, which is kind of a nod to Cabin Fever Labs, which is teased in that episode, but there's also an actual meaning to it. Cabin fever is a sense of restlessness caused by isolation over a long period of time. If you avoid social interaction for too long in its entirety, obviously it can put your mind in a bad state and even get you to act really crazy, which is a thing. Uzi spent that entire episode distancing herself from the rest of the class because they hate her and was busy with the class, so Uzi was not interacting with him. V was around actively projecting onto Uzi because she's afraid and was being petty enough to try to put Uzi under the same fear there, and etc. Uzi, over time, started to overheat because of that as well. She started getting frustrated about the isolation, of course, and eventually it got out of hand. Uzi's absolute solver started absolutely going crazy as she overheated, which eventually manifested in Solver Uzi, where in this solver form she grafted fleshy tendrils and wings made of bone onto herself and immediately ripped Rebecca in half and killed Darren. And when Rebecca managed to escape after Uzi ate Darren to cool down because she was overheating and worker drone oil's the only thing that can make her cool down, she managed to chase Rebecca all the way down to the campfire. And in that episode, she proceeded to kill half her class because, well, this is a very underappreciated detail, but all of the people she killed in that episode were part of that popular group, those notable side characters, you know? They were all people that ostracized Uzi, implying that she very much made a conscious decision with who she hunted, bringing her to a similar point like Doll, except there was a more personal reason for her specific choices rather than a logical reason. And of course, neither are necessarily justified, but really doesn't matter too much. Excuse me. The overall point is that Uzi is very complicated, and the things she's gone through are very much nothing to sleep on. In episode 5, Uzi goes out of her way to try to help in as much as possible. She figures out what's happened in his past and saves him from being lobotomized by Sin and the Absolute Solver due to a program they installed in his head as well as V's. But Uzi managed to hack into them and find their real memories and prevent N from being lobotomized. Same with V. We get to see everything about how Uzi's character is when the key bug that she got in episode 4, which I admit I didn't mention just now in my explanation of episode 4, but it's not important to Uzi's character. It's just a bug that is required to open Cabin Fever Labs and call the elevator. So, Uzi willingly gave up the key bug to Doll because saving N and V was more important to her. She's learned to actually care about those that are on her side, whereas before she didn't care about N that much back in episode 1 because N still had kind of, you know, he did try to kill her before then. Then there's really the biggest, everything so far accumulates back all the way at the end so far with episode 6. Everything just comes together perfectly. Another thing I forgot to mention real quick is that in episode 5, when Uzi saved N and V from being lobotomized, Uzi actually had overridden Sin's admin status. I'm not sure if I'm going to edit that scene in because I've done it a million times in my videos already. Multiple times in 2 videos, I believe. And, really, it's not that important to cite it that many times. But, she had overridden Sin's admin status, which leads to a lot of really horrible situations in episode 6. Because in episode 6, that's when the truth is revealed, now that Uzi's an admin. we learn whenever she meets up with a doll and Tessa that she doesn't really have as much of a problem with Tessa as she does with other humans. Though there's definitely on-site beef there still. And really, Uzi would have probably killed her by now if it wasn't for her seeing Anne's memories of Tessa. But the thing is, after Doll escapes and she learns that that Doll and her parents were both from the cabin fever lab experiment, and that they gave him a sickness that Doll inherited, aka the absolute solver, she decided that she had to figure out what was going on, as well as what happened with her mother, Nori. As she explored the cabin fever labs, though, it backfired horribly. Her and Tessa were all separated. Jay was left to watch the ship, and Uzi was stuck with V instead of her. Which, of course, V isn't really that bad. Talked about that before. But Uzi definitely was not happy to be stuck in a room with V. V loves to taunt her still. Uzi, immediately in there, got horrified by Alice, who had captured her, cutting off a worker drone's head and putting it in a bucket, as well as her consistent antagonizing as well. While there, she tries to use the absolute solver, but since she's so sedated, she just can't. And Alice mentions her mother after Uzi bites Alice's fingers off, which really makes you think. Again, this isn't one of those power scaling videos I made, but you always gotta admit it's crazy that sedated Uzi could bite off Alice's fingers, yet normal Uzi couldn't even bite off Tessa's fingers. Really makes you question why. Really makes you question just how tough Tessa is, but that's off topic. Anyway, the overall point is Uzi asked Alice about her mother for the first time because she did hear Alice talk about 02, aka Uzi's mother, and it turns out that Nori had abandoned them long ago, and that, of course, she was an absolute solver admin who imploded all the humans, aka the Copper 9 explosion we see in episode 1, and left them all. That's also why the humans can no longer control the Sentinels. Those who did have that power are gone, leaving no one else authorized, and therefore Tessa doesn't have that access. In that episode, for the first time, Uzi is absolutely hopeless, even after opening up to Anne in episode 4. Uzi is absolutely stuck there. And later on, Alice stabs Uzi's hand and literally cuts off one of her fingers. And yet, Uzi does manage to escape, but of course comes at a very big price. The absolute solver, of course, possessed her because she's become an admin now. That's something that happens. And it's already decided to officially begin destroying the planet with Uzi as its main puppet. It managed to shut off all gravity in the room because the Absolute Solver is just absolutely crazy with how it works and how it reads and edits reality like it's coding. But after it turns the gravity off, Uzi creates a black hole as well, one of the null black holes, and destroys the controls to close the door. This is also something she does under the Absolute Solver's control. In the end, she passes out from it, and V barely manages to distract the Sentinel for long enough for the black hole to absorb them as well. And when V carries Uzi back to CN, now that they've escaped, Uzi just barely wakes up at time while everyone else is talking about the threat, and Tess is still trying to convince them to kill Uzi, because, of course, Uzi's an Absolute Solver user and a zombie drone. Actually, why did I make that distinction? Zombie drones are just drones that have a chance of acquiring the Absolute Solver. But, Uzi wakes up right after that and greets N, but you can tell everything is horribly strained, and that N is very concerned. Leading up to this, there's a final newsy moment, marking the last happy moment for a good while, and they'll fall for one of Doll's traps after Uzi tries to talk with N about what's going on, and he just absolutely cannot. Just like Uzi back in episode 4 could not talk about her problems. They get caught in Doll's trap because she pretends to be boot looped, even though Uzi and V obviously saw through it. And it turns out that Doll was just playing a buffering GIF or GIF. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be one of those idiots who calls it a GIF. If you call it a GIF, then feel free to dislike the video and get out of here. But, anyway, now that I've just offended half the audience, I'm going to say that I'm going to correct and just say GIF. And Doll played it on her visor thing, which led to Tessa picking up the key bug. And when they got close, Doll grabbed the key bug yet again, activated the elevator to block them off, jumped down, and opened up all the doors so the Sentinels could reach him. And that's where episode 6 ends off, right after Uzi fails to use the Absolute Solver again, with it instead possessing her and creating a black hole, where N's forced to cut off her arm before things get worse. And they all retreat into the falling elevator, while V chooses to fight off Sentinel 000D and actually defeats it, only to be killed by a normal Sentinel afterwards. From what we've seen, things get much worse after the fall, as there's already been a teaser of Uzi breaking N's arm while being really sad. And also, of course, there's a teaser that Uzi's going to destroy Copper 9 in episode 7 or 8, or at least that it's implied, because in Glitch X we can blatantly hear the Absolute Solver say, "Thanks for giving me the planet, loser." Which, yeah. there's a lot going on with Uzi. She's a very complicated character, and people need to put some respect on her name. My next video should hopefully be addressing that Yagster video, but who knows? We'll see. See ya. This is the end of a video. I don't care if it's another anticlimactic one.